Welcome. We're here with Dr. Monica Johnsonbaugh, who opened her practice, Focus 313 Eye Care, in Grosse Pointe, Michigan, about 5 years ago. She's got a corporate practice, and being her own boss has removed some of the earnings ceilings that she felt previously, and that allowed you, Dr. Johnsonbaugh, to pay off your 25-year student loan debt in less than 10.
Correct.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, thank you for having me. So that is exactly what happened. I graduated from Indiana optometry school back in 2009 and had a decent amount of student loan debt that was automatically put into a 25-year repayment plan. So when I graduated optometry school, I started making those payments, obviously, and tried to always pay a little bit more than the minimum, but at certain times in my life, I definitely could only pay the minimum. For example, when I had my daughters and I was on maternity leave or different parts in my life. So I was able to accelerate that quite a bit after opening my own practice, like you said, almost 5 years ago. And that allowed me to make larger payments and pay them off in right about the 10-year mark from graduation, which I was very excited to be able to do.
That's awesome. And did you sort of realize, was there a point where you said, wait a minute, I don't need to carry this debt this long?
Yeah, so that was always the goal. I don't like having a lot of debt, and my goal was always to try to pay it off early. But after we opened my private practice back in 2016, I started to realize that it was successful enough to allow myself to make larger payments. So about middle of 2018 or so is when I thought, if I really ramp up these payments, I can actually be done with these loans right about 10 years post graduation. So I started to do that and really put all my focus into that. I was already hustling quite a bit between my private practice, my retail practice, and I'm also a consultant and speaker in the industry. So between all those things, I was working mostly 6-day work weeks. So I just really put my mind to it and told myself, I can hustle now and then I'll be able to have more freedom later. So I made it happen and thankfully was able to pay them off.
So have you stopped hustling?
Only because of COVID. So I definitely am very hardworking, always have been. I still have, of course, my retail practice in addition to my private practice. My consulting has slowed down a bit because of the lack of the ability to travel, but there's things we can do virtually, so I'm taking advantage of that most definitely. But for the most part, I've really just slowed down because of what's happened in the world, which actually makes me even more thankful that I was able to pay my loans off. I paid them off in December of 2019. And then, obviously we all know what happened in early 2020. So I was really glad to not have that as a concern, which was one of those things I always thought about when it was my goal to pay them off is, you just never know what the future holds. So right now, I'm very thankful to have the success in my life, but I know that life can be very uncertain. I didn't know that a pandemic would be that uncertainty, but having that off my shoulders has been incredibly helpful, and I'm very appreciative of that.
Did you change your lifestyle sort of after, if you're really focused on pushing the money towards this one goal, did you say, okay, good, now let's go buy the car, or, are there other big financial goals ahead?
Yeah, so definitely leading up to paying off the debt, I had a lot of changes and just things that I did as far as, not making lavish expenses and keeping my car for longer than I wanted to and not having the house of my dreams. I really tried to actively make sacrifices. I heard someone say once that you don't want to give up what you want most for what you want right now. And I've always kind of kept that in the back of my mind is, what do I want ultimately? And so making those sacrifices allowed me to achieve that goal. That was actually one of the first things I did when I did pay off my loans was get the car that I've always wanted. Still pretty modest, like my dream car is not, what a lot of people's dream car is, but it was what I wanted. And so that was one of the big things I did do, but I definitely have other financial goals. So my goal isn't to just all of a sudden live lavishly. I'm still very modest in how I spend my money, but yeah, there's definitely things that I don't feel as constrained because of the fact that I don't have my loans over my head.
That's awesome. And what's your advice? I mean, there's obviously a million ways to sort of approach debt, depending on interest rates and depending on what it's for and depending on, forbearances, which a lot of people are in at this moment. Did you get guidance or did you just sort of figure this out for yourself?
So I got a little bit of guidance just from doing some research here and there. Ultimately, I knew that paying off debt is important, and there's really not much around that other than just making as large payments as possible. One little bit of advice that I thought was helpful was to focus on the smaller loans initially, because it just makes you feel better as far as having that satisfaction of checking them off the list. So I actually had everything listed out as far as my loan totals, and the ones, even if the higher interest rate was on the higher one, like the bigger total loans, I would still try to pay off the ones that were smaller first and work my way up to the bigger ones, just because it was dwindling down the number of loans that I had. So that was the main thing. But ultimately, I was just doing, I have a minor in business, so I know a decent amount of business just from my own knowledge and my own history in life. But my goal was to just make as big of payments as possible and still afford my lifestyle and all of that.
That's awesome, and that you were able to do it. And um, sacrifices are not necessarily that brutal, perhaps either. I mean, did you get used to living smaller?
Yeah, so once you're used to it, I mean, I have two children, so they are not inexpensive by any means. So there's things in life that you have to spend money on, and so I still, we still took vacations that we wanted to, and we still lived, the lifestyle that we mostly wanted, but we were just extra cautious in certain things, where I would see, some of my colleagues doing things more lavishly. You don't ever know what someone else's situation is. So I'm never the kind of person that gets sidetracked by what my friends are doing. I just kind of stay to my own goals and keep focused on what my goal is for myself. But yeah, I don't feel like it was that hard, honestly. Once I got into the regimen of how we were doing things, it all kind of worked out. But I'm very thankful for having the taken that plunge into opening my practice, because as you mentioned earlier, where I kind of felt like there was a ceiling, I've said before that I felt like there was a physical ceiling over my head when it came to my earning potential when I was working for other people. And I knew that the only way to be able to flourish the way that I wanted to was to be my own boss. And I'm just very thankful that I was able to take that leap, regardless of having people tell me how hard it would be and how impossible it is. I kind of ignored those naysayers, and I'm very thankful that I made that happen, because I took my future into my own hands.
Sometimes the naysayers can end up being the motivators.
Exactly. That's how I see them anyway.
Excellent.
Precisely.
Dr. Johnsonbaugh, thank you so much for your time. It's been such a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, you as well. Thank you so much, Marjolijn.